Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. I hope you liked today's video, and if you do, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that now, and make sure to hit the notifications button so you'll be notified each time I upload a video. Today's video is all about using only 2 thrifted frames and making multiple backgrounds for them so that you get more bang for the bucks. The first project is with the lattice oval frame. So I take the glass out, and the heavy piece of cardboard that has the original art on it, I go ahead and paint the front and the back with Rust-Oleum linen white chalk paint. I think I use 2 coats on it to make sure that it covers well, and then I use a clear sealer on it. I go ahead and put the sealer on the front and the back because I know that I want a different transfer on both sides. The first transfer that I'm using is with Redesign with Prima, and it's called Floral Home. And it's a large transfer, but it has a lot of script writing on it, and it has some pink florals in the middle. And it has a border around it, but I don't want to use that border. So I pull out my quilting mat, and I'm using an X-Acto knife to trim off that transfer. Now, before I lay it down, I make sure that the top of that piece of cardboard that aligns with the top of the frame is up at the top of the picture. Because if you'll notice around the edges, if you can see that, it's got little holes in it. Well, in the top of the frame, it screws in with only 1 screw, but at the bottom of the frame, it has 2 screws. So I'm trying to be really careful to make sure that I get it put on the right way. And even after I trim it with my X-Acto knife, I still go ahead and cut it around it because it didn't cut through the whole way. It was kind of difficult to use with that X-Acto knife, but probably because the blade was dull, because I don't use it very much. And I go ahead and start putting the transfer on it. And make sure that when you use big transfers like this, don't throw away those extra pieces like that border, because you can use it for something else. And so I just go ahead and I use like a little tool to kind of push down on it and scrape it down. And I go pretty slow because I want to make sure that all the pieces get on. But if it doesn't, just lay it back down and, push on it a little bit more. Now, the reason I'm cutting that clear piece right there is because the bigger piece is a little hard to handle. So I just cut out a little piece, and then you kind of rub over it, and that's called burnishing it. And then that way, if there's any little pieces that didn't adhere really well, you can just push those down. But isn't that so pretty? So let me ask you something. When you are doing something with florals, what is your favorite color to have florals in your home? I know I like pink a lot, but oh my gosh, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And you see where the little holes are? So I know that I need to make sure that it aligns really well. But I didn't try to distress the frame at all. I felt like it just needed to be all white. Now the next side is made with a IOD transfer, and it's called Whispering Willows. And this transfer has 8 pages of all of these beautiful forest animals. And when I first saw it come out, I was thinking, would I use that in a nursery? So I was hesitant about getting it, but I went on and got it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it has so many more things than those forest animals. And actually, I don't have a nursery because my kids are grown, but I like the pictures that are in it. But before I add the little transfer on it, I go ahead and use the IOD Kindest Regards stamp. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I like to use stone gray ink. But this time I use the IOD black ink. Now, this particular stamp is a really large stamp, so I don't even take it off the plastic that it comes on. I just leave it like it is. And then when I do use it afterwards, then I just wipe it down with a baby wipe. Now you'll notice that some of the ink did not adhere very well, but that's okay because I'm going to be putting the transfer on top. So I really like this little deer. We live out in the country and we're used to seeing deer around our house. In fact, my husband is actually a deer hunter. He likes to do that in the wintertime. But these little ones are just so sweet. So on this one, I'm putting the deer down, and then I'm using different pieces of greenery from even different pages in the transfer book. And on some of that greenery, I chop it up and use little pieces of it, because when you look at it in the transfer book, it's one really big piece, and I want to be able to use it multiple times, and so I just kind of cut apart different pieces of it. And actually what I'm doing now is I'm layering some of that transfer on top of another transfer, so it kind of looks a little bit more natural. And then you'll notice up at the top there is a lighter color flower, and I actually cut that flower transfer in half, and I have part of it on it, and then the other half I'll use on another project some other time. And if it looks like maybe that part of that flower is just kind of hanging off at the top. And then it's got little berries. And once again, we live out in the country and we have blueberry bushes and all kind of berries around our house. So do you live out in the country? And do you like to go blackberry picking in the summertime? We like to use blackberries a lot. And we have some blueberry bushes at our house that just make so many blueberries that a lot of times I just have to give them away because my freezer gets pretty full of them. And so I've got all of the little pieces on now, and I'm just using that plastic again to rub over it. So if there's any little pieces that didn't adhere very well, it pushes them down. And that's called burnishing it. And I just go over it. Now that IOD ink, it doesn't smear because it dries really quick. Now that's where you can see that half of a flower up at the top. But I just think this is so sweet. And here's just another little piece of that flower. But I decided not to use it. So see, I put it back on that paper. Okay, now the next project is this frame. And as soon as I saw it in the thrift shop, I just loved it. And I'm really not good at trying to describe what shape it is. It's straight on the bottom, and then the rest of it looks like an arch. And it actually didn't come with any glass. It just came with the frame in the back. So what I did was I went on and painted that one. And this is a rice paper that's made by Reba Rose Creations. And it's got all of the things that I love so much. It's got birds on it. It's got French script on it. It's got that big, that stamp that, you know, when you mail something on it. And it's just beautiful. And so I could have pieced it up very, you know, here and there, but I just like the whole piece. So I laid it down on that piece of the back of the frame. And then a lot of times when we use rice paper or we decoupage something, we tear it with our fingers. But because I don't really want to do that, it's going to be just the plain old picture. I trim off the white edges and I don't even bother to tear it because you're not going to see those edges anyway. Now I still have to trim off quite a bit of it because it is a larger piece of rice paper. But once again, I save all those pieces because you just never know when you're going to use them for something else. And especially if you're someone who does junk journaling and you like to use mixed media, those kind of pieces can be used to layer with. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be putting it down with liquid patina, which is a DIY product. And I like it because it's different from Mod Podge. It's a lot thinner, and I just like the way it works. I have used Mod Podge a lot, and sometimes when I use it, I also water it down just a little bit. Now, when I put the rice paper down, if I could just go ahead and put that liquid patina all over it, but I don't want to. It makes it too difficult. So once I've gotten it all trimmed, I just put on a little bit of that liquid patina up at the top, and then I put the rice paper down on it. And then once I get that laid down, then I'm going to hold up the rest of it and put a little bit more liquid patina after that, so that I just kind of work my way down the picture. And on this one, I think I waited until afterwards to trim it because I wanted to make sure that I didn't mess up on the cut. Before on the other one, it was a transfer, so I really needed to go ahead and use that X-Acto knife to cut it. But when I'm putting that liquid patina down, I'm pushing down around those corners, and that makes it easier. And then I just flip it over on the back, and I can just use like some small scissors, the kind that cuts really well with small things, to cut around the edges. But because I really want to make sure that I get the most out of this frame, I take a piece of cardstock and I paint it white, because I know that it's going to go inside of this frame. And actually, I use that backing that has the little bird and the nest on it. That's actually the part of the frame. So when I get this piece of cardstock all decorated and I put that in the frame, I'm just laying it right on top, and nobody has to know that behind it is another picture. Now, this is an IOD stamp called La Campagna. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, so I apologize if I kind of butchered the word. But I really like the rooster on it. So I did take that one off because it is large, but I don't like to cut up my stamps. Some people do. I like to pull off just the pieces that I use. And I've got it all inked up, and I do use the black ink on this one. But sometimes even when you ink it up, you'll get a little bit of ink around it. And so if you lay it down, and if you accidentally press down on those little pieces, then it's going to smudge. So when I get it all inked up, I just use a baby wipe and kind of go around the edges, and I go ahead and wipe off those little extra pieces. And I like this rooster. It could also be a French country picture, because I know that that is something that you see a lot in French country decor. But I have to tell you all a funny story about a rooster. When my dad was alive and he was in a wheelchair, he'd had a stroke, and he would go outside, and our neighbors had a rooster that crowed not just in the morning, but all hours of the day. My dad would get so aggravated because he liked to be outside so much, but that rooster just about drove him crazy. But I like that once I pull it up, it's so pretty. And then after that, I want to fill in those white spaces. So I use the IOD stamp called Vintage Textures. And it looks kind of like it crackles. But now, once all this is dry, I want it to I guess, like last a long time, because it's just stamped. And I also want to do something else with it. So I put some clear wax on it. And I don't use very much. And I believe this is Annie Sloan clear wax. And I put the clear wax on it because after that, I want to put a little bit of distressing ink on this one. No, I'm sorry, I use Voodoo Gel Stain. But, you know, sometimes if you use those gel stains, if you don't put a clear wax up underneath and you think you've got it too dark, then you're not going to get it off. So it's better to go ahead and use it. And then within this stamp, the La Campagne, there were some other pieces that I added to the bottom. Now, I took another piece of cardstock and painted it white. Now, this one, it's really not my favorite, but I wanted to go ahead and put it in because it's got a lot of different things on it. It's got parts of a napkin in it, and then part of that napkin has those little things that I just glued down, and it looks like a locket that's been opened, and it's got a picture on either side. But if you'll look up at the top and on the side, that's actually a paper doily that I coffee stained. And so you can go to Walmart or Dollar Tree and you can get some doilies. And then after you finish your coffee in the morning, if you have any left, you can just lay some paper doilies in it. I've got like a little tub that I do this in that I use all the time. And if I have any left, then I just pour it over those paper doilies. I just do one at a time, and it stains it. And then I let it be on a little strainer, and it's something that you can use a lot in mixed media. And sometimes, if you're really careful, you can take the coffee filters that are in your coffee machine, and they're already going to be stained a little bit because of the coffee grounds in it. And so you can rinse off those coffee grounds, but make sure that if you live out in the country and you have a septic tank, don't wash those down the sink because it's not good for your system. And then you can just take those coffee grounds off, and then it's already stained. And so that's really neat. It's just something that you can layer with. And so I've got the paper doily on there, and I've got different parts of that napkin. And I'm just separating it and using different pieces here and there on it. Now, one of the things that you won't see, but you'll see at the final picture, that I have these little plastic gold frames. I can't even remember where I got them at. And one of them is an oval shape. And you know, those little lockets that are decoupaged on there are in an oval shape. So I think it was on the left side. I just glued that little gold plastic frame on top of that. The picture still would show through, and that just kind of added an extra layer. Now, it's got some script on that napkin, but in one of my previous videos, I have a napkin that just has French script on it. So I'm also adding that to it. So you've got multiple layers of napkin and different things on there. Now, when you use a napkin, there is going to be some wrinkling, but use that to your advantage, because once it gets all finished and it's all dry, then I take a brush with a little bit of white paint off and I dry brush over it, and it gives a really cool effect. Now, this is just a little wooden tag that I painted white. Now, this is the only piece on here today that is not double-sided. So these are just pages from an old book, and they're already yellowed, and I like that part of it. So I just tear off the extra pieces on the side so that you only see the words. And because it's not big enough, then I have to layer it in different pieces. But before I put each piece down, and I just use a glue stick on this, I distress it on the edges. So yeah, when you look at it, you can see that there's different pieces of paper on it, and that's okay. I like it. And this is a bird transfer from that Whispering Willow. There's a lot of birds in that transfer. So actually, if you'll look down below that bird, there's like a branch with a leaf on it, and I actually put the little bird's foot on that. And that's what's really neat about transfers, is you can layer it and nobody knows that you've kind of used bits and pieces. And then I'm just using sandpaper to sand around the edge. And then once it gets all finished, then I distress around the edges, and I use that little dabber. And actually, I just kind of go over the whole thing. And before I finish it off, and make sure that you seal it, of course, afterwards. Especially if you're going to be reselling it. And then what I did was I took some Spanish moss and put it in a Ziploc bag with some Mod Podge. And I made like a little pretend bird's nest. Lisa on Our Shabby Cottage, she does that. So I'm using her trick. And I just let it dry overnight. And then I actually made some little bird eggs a while back. And I just took some of the air dry clay, and I just rolled it into little balls, and I painted them, and then I kind of flicked some paint on it to where they look speckled. So it adds another dimension to it. And then once it was all finished, then I added some ribbon up at the top, And then the tie that you can hang it with was made from just a strip of muslin that I had coffee stained with that. So if you have any coffee left in the morning, don't throw it out, because there's a lot of things that you can use later on. So take advantage of that coffee to stain some papers and even some fabrics. And so I'm just, after I put that distressing ink on it, I kind of smudge it with my fingers. And so here we go. Here's all of the pieces. And there's that little gold frame. And then I put some lace up at the top. I made like a little bow. See that little ribbon and some of that eyelash yarn. Now, because I'm going to be using it different times, don't tell anybody, but once I got through filming this one, I pulled that little ribbon off so that I could use something else on it. Now, if I was going to resell it, I probably wouldn't be able to use all three pieces, all three backgrounds that I made for it. And I'm actually not going to resell these frames, because you're probably going to be seeing them in new videos, because I really like these frames, and I think I could use them for a lot of different things later on. So these are not going to my vendor booth. And there's our little baby Bambi. Isn't she sweet? And there's my little bowl of buttons that I used in my past video. And I'm not adding anything extra to the lattice frame. I don't want to put any bows on that, because you don't want it to be too busy, especially with that frame being in that lattice shape. And there's the first one. There's the little bird. And let's see, you can see it? I think you can see it. Oh, that's right, down at the bottom, that's where I put my little bird's nest on that one. And on that tag, it looks like the bird nest is kind of laying on top of it. So it's kind of like half of a bird nest. And there's just a little extra bird that I have at home. And that little milk glass candy jar was my grandmother's. And so you're going to see it again with the other pictures that I put in it. So today you've got shabby chic, you've got farmhouse, you've got French country. So all of these different pieces can be used in multiple ways. And there's some little black lace that I thrifted recently. And I think it was like lingerie lace, because it was kind of stretchy. Oh, and also I used some voodoo gel stain on this frame to kind of darken it up a little bit. So friends, thank you so much for watching today. Please make sure that you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and have a great weekend.